Hayao Miyazaki's new film, Kimi tachi wa dou ikiru ka, or How Do You Live, is now set to release December 8th in America under the English title The Boy and the Heron. Did you catch what happened there? Somewhere in the midst of creating and supporting the release of the English version of the film, we went from How Do You Live to The Boy and the Heron. Listen, a lot of us grew up with these films. Engraved in our childhoods are the most gorgeous and fantastical environments and scenarios. Characters that feel real, full of life. Some that walk on water, some that walk on air, and some that are pigs. Characters that scale castles, are in touch with nature, or just simply find the confidence to pave the way for their own independence and make their own magic. What caught my attention about his new film, though, was solely the title, and how even the direct translation works so well in sparking my curiosity. How do you live? A question, I thought. This movie is asking the characters, me, and the rest of the world a question. An existential, thought-provoking question that felt so profound to me, it felt personal. But I want to talk about subtlety. Some of you might know about a phenomenon loosely described as linguistic untranslatability. This term acknowledges the limitations of translation of a specific language against another. In other words, certain nuances, cultural references, or concepts in one language can't be fully expressed or replicated in another due to differences in things like cultural context or the language structure itself. I can live with knowing this though, because for the most part, some of that nuance has to fall through the cracks for people to share ideas, art, and just creative expression in general with each other across all parts of the world without having to learn an entirely new language. But the decision to give the movie the name The Boy and the Heron over How Do You Live isn't linguistic untranslatability. It's localization. Localization of films, or the process of making your content relevant to a local audience, is because of cultural differences, to avoid cultural misunderstandings, and plain marketability. There are more reasons, but it all leads back to those three blanketing the topic. And even with these reasons in mind, it still doesn't make sense. How are there cultural differences in this title? What misunderstandings are we trying to avoid? How do you live is a question that, as far as I know, doesn't have any ties to any specific part of the world. It's a question that is profoundly curious, one that you don't hear often. These kinds of questions should be asked all around the world, because when I think of that question, I reflect on the things I did, the things I'm doing right now, and the kind of person I want to grow into. So, what about marketability then? I can't seem to figure this out either. When this film was first announced, it was reportedly going to have no promotion or advertising. This lasted until the eventual premiere in Japan. Afterwards, all sorts of promotional art from the premiere started to show up online, and then a trailer, and then an English dub trailer. Why was it done this way? Well, it was reported that producer and co-founder of Studio Ghibli, as well as longtime friend to Miyazaki himself, Toshio Suzuki, felt that deep down, this kind of mystery and no advertising to spoil any part of the film is what moviegoers latently desire.
僕らが子供の時も若い時も要するに今度の映画はどんな映画なんだろうってタイトルと一枚の絵だけで内容を想像したでそれが楽しかったんですよ。皆さんはそれに対してね最初のうちは大丈夫って随分言ってたんだけれどだんだんやってるうちにねその気になってきて。
This is an idea that I not only think worked, but highly agree with and love. I and everyone around me wanted to know what was up with this film. Miyazaki's working on a new film. It could be his last. He's really taking his time with this one. He's never gonna retire. And to top off the mystery, it's called How Do You Live? Fast forward some months, and now the film is set to release in America with all sorts of promotional materials scattered throughout social media under a different name. But the name itself feels like it went in the opposite direction, as if it took a piece of the film away from the audience and experience. It's not that I'll forget the original name of the film, but more so that people might never know about it, and when thinking about it, won't have the experience and feeling that question gives in mind while watching or recalling the film. Now, let me give you another example as to why this name change wasn't needed. I'm going to analyze specifically all of Miyazaki's film titles where he was the sole director for the sake of example and for the sake of not going overboard by including works, whether shows or films, that he either wrote for or co-directed, as well as the many other films in the Studio Ghibli library. First, let's take a look at the films where little to nothing changes in the meaning of the title. These 4 films are essentially direct translations with each word corresponding near perfectly to the English language. Let's also look at these 3. The Wind Rises in Japan is kaze tachinu, literally just the wind is rising or the wind stands up, about the same meaning. My Neighbor Totoro, or Tonari no Totoro. Tonari just means next to or beside, and tonari no being the possessive, equates to the neighbors or the neighboring Totoro. Pokoroso, the Japanese version means crimson pig. This title got switched to Pokoroso, which is Italian for red pig. Crimson is a type of red, so I argue not much changed here either. Now, these next films have some changes in presentation, but are essentially the same as well. Kiki's Delivery Service, or Majo no Takyubin, in Japanese means witch's parcel or express delivery service. It refers to a popular express courier service in Japan, but I won't go into all that. All they did here was switch out witch with Kiki, and Kiki is the witch's name that the title is talking about. Tenku no Shiro Raputa, Castle in the Sky. The English title removes the castle's name, Raputa, and the kanji Tenku, which is translated to sky, but could also be referred to as heavens. Lupin Sansei, Cagliostro no Shiro, Lupin III, the Castle of Cagliostro. I realized during the editing of this video that I mistakenly thought they omitted Lupin III in the English version of the title, and since they didn't, this film actually sits earlier on with the other films for it being such a one-to-one translation. So far, we've covered 9 out of 11 of his films, all of which that if have small changes, don't constitute a major change in presentation or meaning. Now let's take a look at the last 2 films. Spirited Away, or Sen to Chihiro no Kamikakushi, literally Sen and Chihiro's act of being spirited away. All the English version does differently is not name-drop characters in the title. Lastly, we have Ponyo, or Gake no Ue no Ponyo. In Japanese, the direct translation is Ponyo on the cliff, as opposed to in the sea. The Japanese title emphasizes how being away from the sea is how Ponyo's adventure in the movie started. We can see that even though these last 2 films have arguably the most change overall, the English equivalents don't fall short in bringing forth the essence that the original Japanese titles have. Therefore, accuracy of translation isn't and has never been an issue. The issue arises when things are given completely new identities as a result of changing something as simple as a title. The Boy and the Heron is a perfect example of this. What do we as the viewer understand from this title? That in this film, there's a boy and a heron. That's it. Maybe there's some kind of event that happens with these 2 in the movie, and maybe it involves these 2 deeply. And maybe this is enough for longtime viewers of Miyazaki films to want to go and see it. But what about the audience who has never seen a film by Miyazaki or Studio Ghibli? What about those that never and will never hear about the Japanese title? The reason this change is so important is that originally it was meant to come across a certain way, and now this film has a completely new identity. It doesn't carry with it the impact that the original name has anymore. When talking about the film with friends or anyone around me, I'm frustrated that I'll have to call it The Boy and the Heron when deep down I'll want so badly to call it How'd You Live. It's because I know that How'd You Live is a title that because sparks curiosity, it creates conversation. For me, ever since I first heard about it, my heart lights up to want to hear what people think about the title. That light is why I'm going to continue to talk about it, and that light is why I made this video and am saying these words to begin with. Miyazaki's films, for a lot of us, have been the reason or reasons that some of us do what we do today. Whether it's painting, animation, filmmaking, voice acting, writing, editing, compositing, or even just wanting to live a better life so that in turn others around us can do so as well. I'm not telling you that the movie is going to be bad just because of a name change. I'm telling you that this movie is going to be amazing, and I wish that they had kept the original name when bringing it overseas because that title is a part of its identity and a part of why the film is so great. But regardless of whatever the film is called in other countries, how do you live in its original form will never change. Do I think The Boy and the Heron is a bad name? No, not at all actually, but I do think it's not the right name for a film like How Do You Live? The saying goes, don't judge a book by its cover, but I feel like that saying needs an update. You see, the title is a part of the cover, and those words in combination with the cover hold weight and power behind them. And I know the saying is said because lots of books with arguably uninteresting covers or titles hold magnificent stories. So why, for one of, if not his last works, are we not giving it the name it was originally intended to have? Here's a revised version of that saying, which, I want to add, can be used under any circumstance, whether book or not. For readers, don't judge a book by its cover. For writers and creators, consider how well crafted your cover is, because it's the first thing readers see, and therefore the first impression. I decided to make this video because I want to live in a way that is true to myself. For me, that means expressing my opinion in a way that reaches others and sparks curiosity and wonder without hurting anyone. For me, that means not going back on my word and being honest with myself. And for me, that means expressing myself, being kind to myself, and to those in my life. So, I have just one question to ask you. When you leave this video and go back to your life, family, hobby, wherever you are, and wherever you strive to be, 君たちはどう生きるか? Or, how do you live?